afternoon. It's Monday, the 29th of December. I'm Erin Viner, and this is IBA News broadcasting from Jerusalem. Military police are investigating an incident in which a Palestinian was shot dead by IDF forces this afternoon after soldiers on duty in the area spotted a group of Palestinians endangering the public and throwing rocks at Israeli vehicles traveling on the road between Migdalim and Tapuach in Samaria. Army officials say that soldiers fired warning shots before shooting at the suspects. The Palestinian Ma'an news agency named the dead suspect as Imam Jamil Dweikat and reported that a second Palestinian was injured in IDF gunfire and is being treated at a hospital in Nablus. The Palestinian resolution calling on Israel to withdraw to the pre-1967 lines by 2017 may be presented to the United Nations Security Council later today. According to Palestinian negotiator Saeb Erekat, the version being submitted by Jordan on behalf of the Palestinian Authority includes 8 amendments and will be considered today by the Arab UN ambassadors. The Palestinian Authority was hoping for a vote in the Security Council as early as this Wednesday, but PA Foreign Minister Riyad al-Maliki now believes that it's not likely to take place until early in the coming year. At this time, it is still unknown whether the motion would receive the critical 9 votes from the 15-member body required for passage, or if the United States is prepared to veto the measure, even if it is approved. Washington is insisting that there should be a negotiated solution to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict and not one imposed by the United Nations. Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas informed U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry that the Palestinians will advance their statehood bid today, in spite of Kerry's request to delay the measure until after Israel's general elections in March.
We will submit the original draft resolution to the Security Council, hoping to conclude the vote by tomorrow or the day after, before the end of the year. The resolution specifies a Palestinian state on the 1967 lines with East Jerusalem as capital, calls on a solution to all core issues, including refugees, in accordance with the relevant Security Council and General Assembly resolutions.
IBA's Ali Wogelenter today asked several Knesset members for their views on the Palestinians' decision to submit their statehood motion to the UN Security Council.
The issue of the Palestinians just further proves the fact that we have absolutely no direction here as a country. If you would ask the Prime Minister, what is your plan to deal with this issue? There is no plan. It's just putting out fires here and there, and it shows the need for new leadership that has some kind of a plan in terms of how we're going to deal with the conflict with the Palestinians.
I think Israel should be the first one to come to the world and say yes to Palestinian state. We need to save Israel as a Jewish and democratic state, and the only way we do it is to have another state near us, the Palestinian state, 2 states on one land. So I believe that Israel should go and say, yes, we're going to have a Palestinian state. We should have a program for 4 years, 2 years, 5 years, no matter what. We know the way, we know the result at the end, and we need to go there.
But this specific move by the Palestinians to go unilaterally by themselves to the United Nations, is that a good move?
I don't advise the Palestinian what is a good move for them or not. I'm Israeli, and I'm Israeli representative, and I think what is good to the Israeli state. And I think what's good to the Israeli state is that we will have a Palestinian state near us, and we will solve the conflict.
Turning now to the elections, and a hot tape is shaking up the Shas party, and corruption allegations are further entangling Israel Beitenu, which may have encouraged a veteran minister and member of Knesset to call it quits. Here are the details as IBA's political correspondent, Ali Wogelenter.
Good evening. Never a dull moment in an election campaign, but today's news is particularly explosive. We'll start with the Shas party. In a 76-second home video from 2008 aired on Channel 2 last night, the late Rabbi Obadiah Yosef is heard in a sharp attack on Aryeh Deri, the current head of the Shas party. The clip documents Yosef's discussion with family members over pressure brought upon him to restore Deri to the party leadership. Yosef is heard saying flat out, 30-40% will run away from us. Why? Adding that party constituents will ask, why did you take a thief? Why did you take a bribe taker? Yosef also had another problem with Deri. I know from past experience he is too independent, he told his son. That's not evil. And the rabbi said he cannot be a traitor to Eli Yishai, who succeeded Deri as Shas's political leader after the 1999 elections. 1 year after, Deri was convicted for bribery and was sentenced to 3 years in jail. No one has taken credit for leaking the video, but the damage to Shas and Deri is immeasurable. The recent establishment by Yishai of his own breakaway Ha'am Itanu party has badly dented Shas's standing in opinion polls, and the latest revelations could further harm the party's political fortunes. I asked MK Rabbi Dov Lippin of Yesh Atid about this latest revelation, about the investigation of Yisrael Beitenu, and other recent developments in the election campaign.
The truth is, I have to differentiate. We in Yesh Atid are hard at work day and night and haven't had very much of the Wild West environment, and we're bringing our message to the people in terms of what we've accomplished and what we are planning to accomplish and continue to do. It's entertaining to sit back on the side and see all this happening. The latest development in terms of Shas, I have to say for me, especially as a religious Jew and a rabbi, I think it's a tragedy for religious Judaism that the rabbi, a grand rabbi in a community, is being used, and excuse the expression, as just a rag thrown back and forth between people who are supposedly respecting him. All they're doing is bringing shame to his memory, and I hope that all voters from Shas who respect Rav Ovadia Yosef will just leave that all behind, leave both parties behind, and find another political home.
As for that investigation of Yisrael Beitenu, another bombshell name has been revealed. Jerusalem City Councilman Moshe Leon, a close associate of Foreign Minister Avigdor Lieberman, was detained and questioned for several hours yesterday on suspicions of facilitating bribes in the Yisrael Beitenu corruption scandal. Leon, who's unsuccessfully tried to run for mayor of Jerusalem, was released to house arrest for a period of 5 days following 9 hours of questioning. He was reportedly being considered a candidate for Yisrael Beitenu's list for the upcoming Knesset elections. He also previously served as the director of the Prime Minister's office during Benjamin Netanyahu's first term in office. I spoke this morning with Meretz MK Michal Rosen, who told me that what bothers her about the investigation of Yisrael Beitenu is that to the public it casts suspicions on all politicians, leaving the public feeling fed up ahead of the election.
I think corruption is a terrible thing for politics. I think what happened is that most of the public will say, you see them, every one of the politicians is corrupted. And what will happen because of that the people will not go to vote. They will say, everyone is the same, so I won't vote for them. And this is a very bad thing for democratic state and for the political situation in Israel.
And finally, as if Yisrael Beitenu doesn't have enough on its plate, it is losing one of its most distinguished MKs, who has been serving in the Knesset for decades. Senior party member and tourism minister Uzi Landau announced yesterday that he would not be running in the upcoming elections. The 71-year-old Yisrael Beitenu MK quits after 31 years in public service, including service as Internal Security Minister, a minister in the Prime Minister's office, Minister of National Infrastructure, Minister of Energy and Water, and in his most recent role, Tourism Minister. Said Landau, I see myself continuing to act and contribute, but for me, it is time to move on outside the parliamentary system. It is not clear if the investigation of his party was a reason for Landau calling it quits. Aaron?
Thanks for that report. Well, coalition building after this election could be quite challenging. That's the view of Times of Israel editor David Horovitz, who told IBA's Eli Wogelenter that the political winds are still too tough to gauge.
We're so used to all the complexities of multi-party coalitions and so on, and yet you do see a potential for so many variables the morning after the election. I mean, first of all, it's very foolish to even try and predict anything. I think maybe one broad trend is that Israelis, it seems to me, and it seems from the polls, are trending to the right. I don't think there are many people who think that Naftali Bennett is deeply unhappy that we're going to the elections. I think he thinks he's going to do quite well. You know, the division of votes on the right, how many the Likud get, how many go to Kahlon and Yair Lapid towards the center, and how many go to Bennett, that's all, you know, we'll see how that plays out. But I think Bennett, broadly speaking, thinks he's going to do fairly well. I think almost all other bets are off. And, you know, the question of who will be the biggest party and which party leaders will recommend which colleague as having the best chance to build a coalition, there I think there's that prospect. For a morning after, or 10 o'clock on the night of the exit polls, you think you know who's won the elections. You know, it's often been the case in the past that it's not been completely clear. I think it's very possible to be even less clear. In 2009, was it, Kadima got one more seat than the Likud. But still, you realize that Netanyahu had a much better potential to build a coalition than Livni had. It took her a while to internalize that, but it was pretty obvious right away. The numbers this time, because of the Kahlons and the Lapids and the potential rise of Bennett and what that does for the Likud, and it'd be interesting to see if the Livni-Herzog alliance continues to give a real boost to Labour, and how the Arab parties might do, especially if most of them or all of them unite. I think the movement within the blocs and the potential antipathy to this or that party leader, most especially Netanyahu. There may be people who just don't want Netanyahu as prime minister, and therefore party leaders might try to maneuver. All of these possibles, I think, will greet us, or could potentially greet us, meaning that you go to vote and you think you've decided who's going to lead the country. It may not turn out to be the case quite that quickly.
And would that be especially true if no single party alone gets more than, say, 21 seats?
I mean, look at what we're talking about here. We have 120 seats in Parliament, and in a normal system, you'd think one party gets 60-something, and they have a majority in Parliament, and they form the government. Now, we've never had that luxury in Israel. Never had the luxury of single-party government. There's never, in the whole history of the state, been a party that won a majority in the Knesset, and we've had experiments to try to make it direct election of the prime minister and talk of constituency systems. But it would appear, depending on potential alliances, again, even before the elections, if other parties join up together, but it might be that we end up with a whole lot of medium-sized parties and, innumerable arithmetical options after the votes have been counted.
Officials in Indonesia say that objects spotted earlier today by Australian planes do not belong to the AirAsia aircraft that went missing with 162 passengers and crew aboard yesterday. Other authorities announced that flight QZ-8501 is presumed to be lying at the bottom of the Java Sea. We hear more now from the Associated Press.
Search planes and ships from several countries are searching the waters near Indonesia looking for any sign of a missing AirAsia jet. Search officials admit things do not look good for the plane that disappeared Sunday with 162 people on board.
Based on the coordinates given to us and the evaluation that the estimated crash position is in the sea, the hypothesis is that the plane is at the bottom of the sea.
Until today, we have never lost a life. But I think any airline CEO who says that he can guarantee that his airline is 100% safe is not accurate. There's so many factors, and right now we cannot speculate as to what was the cause of the accident.
AirAsia Flight 8501 vanished Sunday in an area thick with storm clouds. The Airbus A320 was headed from Surabaya, Indonesia to Singapore. Almost everyone on board was Indonesian, and relatives of the passengers are going to a crisis center. Officials say there was no distress signal, although one of the pilots asked to increase altitude minutes before contact was lost. The plane was last heard from about 42 minutes into its flight.
All of the remaining passengers trapped during the Greek ferry disaster have been safely evacuated from the Adriatic Sea. 478 people were aboard the vessel when it caught fire off the coast of Corfu. It killed 5 and left at least 4 others injured. Italian and Greek helicopter crews worked into the night to airlift passengers first to another ship and then on to Italy's Bari port in a dramatic rescue mission that began after the blaze broke out on the lower deck of the Italian-flagged Norman Atlantic. The ferry was stabilized by cables attached to a tug to assist in rescue operations and will ultimately be pulled into port. As they waited throughout the day for news of their loved ones, family members on shore expressed deep concern.
I spoke to him about 6 hours ago. He called me and he was his usual jolly self and being silly, which he always is because he knew that I would be worried. And he said, well, I don't have a car anymore, you don't have your iPad anymore, they've all gone. And I said, oh, for goodness sake, I'm not worried about that. What about you two? Are you two all right? Because he's there with his fiancée. And are you going to be able to get off that ship? And he said, I don't know. He said that he thought the fire had started down on the vehicle deck and that they were all standing outside. And I said, but it's just so awful, Nicholas, for us, we don't know anything. He said, well, it's an awful lot worse for us because we're actually standing out here in the pouring rain and thunder and lightning, and we really don't just know exactly what's going to happen.
Turning now to Sweden, where a fire gutted a mosque in the town of Eslöv amid a fierce nationwide dispute over immigration. There were no injuries in the attack, and authorities are attributing it to arson. Law enforcement agencies say that since Halloween at the end of October, the premises have been vandalized twice, and they're calling the escalation very worrying. This was the second suspected incident of arson at a Muslim house of prayer in the Scandinavian nation within the past 4 days. 5 people were injured in a blaze at a mosque in the town of Eskilstuna on Christmas Day. Sweden is engaged in a fierce political debate over the number of asylum seekers to accept, as critics argue that the high rate of those coming to live there is gradually transforming the previously homogenous nation into a multicultural country. Here at home, hundreds of police forcibly evicted 8 remaining families from the North Tel Aviv neighborhood Givat Amal this morning after the Supreme Court ruled that they have no legal right to the property. During clashes with police, several tenants barricaded themselves inside their homes, and others threatened to set themselves on fire. 2 people were arrested, and all were removed from the area after several hours. All of the remaining buildings in the neighborhood are set to be demolished by this afternoon. The government initially placed around 150 people in Givat Amal in the late 1940s, but they were never granted legal ownership of the property. After the land was purchased by the Elad Israel Company, owned by business tycoon Yitzhak Tshuva in 1987, a redevelopment plan was drawn up to build luxury high-rise apartments on the site. At least 2 families are believed to have brokered a deal to compensate residents to leave voluntarily, but Tshuva canceled it after the Supreme Court ruled that the residents were never the rightful owners. A goodwill visit to Israel for Palestinian children orphaned during Operation Protective Edge has been barred by Hamas authorities in Gaza. Peace activists organized the mission with the permission of the IDF to bring 37 children and 5 adult escorts to the Jewish state. The itinerary included tours of Israeli Arab towns, southern areas that were heavily hit by Gaza-fired rockets, the Tel Aviv beach, a safari park, and a performance by a Jewish Arab musical group. They were also scheduled to meet with Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas in Ramallah. A spokesman for the Hamas-controlled Interior Ministry in Gaza said that the kids' trip was nixed to preserve the culture and tradition of the people in Gaza, and because it included stops at unspecified suspicious sites. The government has approved a cleanup operation for the rehabilitation of the Evronon Nature Reserve following the large crude oil spill that polluted the area 2 weeks ago. The 17 million shekel project will tend to the damaged soil and wildlife in the area. The costly proposal will be funded by the taxpayers, although the Eilat Ashkelon Pipeline Company will be required to underwrite the immediate costs. The Finance Ministry will also give special allocations to the Nature Reserve and the Parks Authority toward efforts to restore the area, including the creation of a sky bridge for animals. It appears that Channel 10 television will go off the air at the end of the year in just 3 days' time. The network halted its regular broadcast last night at 10 p.m. and instead displayed a photograph of Prime Minister Netanyahu alongside a message announcing its impending cessation, and that because of the Prime Minister, who serves as Communications Minister as well, refused to find a solution to the financial issues that plague the station, and the employees' union have decided to stop the broadcast. Normal programming at Channel 10 was resumed this morning. In December 2012, the Knesset voted to extend Channel 10's franchise for 2 years and give the cash-strapped station a loan to cover its debts, while requiring that it transfer operations to Jerusalem. Since that time, it has accumulated tens of millions of shekels in debts and failed to meet the set criteria for continued broadcast rights. Convicted bank embezzler Eti Alon may soon be released from prison. She was sentenced in 2003 for stealing 300 million shekels from the trade bank, where she worked as the deputy chief of investment. Alon confessed to carrying out the crime over a 3-year period, saying that she did it to help her brother Ofer Maximov pay off around 100 million shekels in gambling debts to underworld crime bosses. The massive scope of the theft led to the collapse of the trade bank and cost the government $500 million shekels in insurance payments to depositors. Alon has served 12 of her 17-year sentence, and the prison board is recommending the reduction of her term by 1/3 for good behavior, as is permitted by law. High school students are threatening to play hooky after annual field trips and other activities outside educational facilities have been canceled. The move follows the decision by the Secondary School Teachers Association to launch sanctions, including a ban on staff to accompany the students off school grounds. The teachers are demanding that they be absolved of all criminal culpability for pupils' welfare during such trips after the state chose to prosecute a school principal and teachers for negligence in a 2009 death of a 16-year-old who drowned during a visit to Tiberias. In a letter to Prime Minister Netanyahu, the National Student and Youth Council asked that he intervene and bring a halt to the teacher sanctions, warning that failure to resolve the issue will lead to a walkout by students on January 14th. Now taking a look at local finance, and the shekel today lost strength against all major foreign currencies, while share prices on the Tel Aviv Stock Exchange were also down across the board. Here's a look at the mid-afternoon numbers. The IBA weather team tells us to expect another mostly sunny day tomorrow with no significant change in temperatures. Here's the forecast at home and abroad for the next 24 hours. Thank you for being with us this afternoon. Laura Cornfield will be at this desk tomorrow to bring you the latest breaking news from Israel. I'm Erin Viner, wishing you a great evening and shalom from Jerusalem.